In Kharkiv Oblast, Ukrainian defenders have repelled an assault by the Russian occupiers and forced them to withdraw. In the area of the settlements of Kozasha Lopan and Sosnivka, Ukrainian troops repelled the enemy's assault and forced them to withdraw. According to the spokesman of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, on the Kharkiv front, units of the occupiers of the Western Military District, Baltic Fleet Coastal Forces, and the Mobilization Reserve of the 1st and 2nd Army Corps concentrated their efforts on holding previously captured positions. In order to disrupt the logistical support of the armed forces of Ukraine in the area of the village of Sirkuni, the occupiers remotely mined the area and launched an airstrike from Ka-52 helicopters in the Petrivka area. According to Motizianik, the situation is more difficult on the Slovyansk front, where the armed forces of Ukraine are preventing the occupiers' attempts to create conditions for an offensive on Slovyansk. The enemy carried out assaults in the area around the villages of Dovenki and Mazanivka. Fighting is still in progress. The enemy also carried out an airstrike using a pair of Ka-52 helicopters in the areas of Divrivne and Bohodrodichny. Around the village of Dolina, Ukrainian soldiers successfully repelled the enemy's assault. In general, the occupier is conducting artillery fire in the direction of Ukrainian positions along the entire front line. Meanwhile, the Russian military continues to suffer serious casualties in Ukraine, amounting to an average of 200 troops killed and between 400 to 600 wounded every day. Moscow is hurting for experienced men, but cannot call up its full reserves because Russian President Vladimir Putin insists on calling the largest war on European soil since the end of World War II a special military operation. The Ukrainian Ministry of Defense claimed that as of Tuesday, Ukrainian forces have killed approximately 36,350 Russian troops and wounded approximately thrice that number, destroyed 217 fighters, attack and transport jets, 187 attack and transport helicopters, 1,594 tanks, 806 artillery pieces, 3,772 armored personnel carriers, 247 multiple launch rocket systems, 15 boats and cutters, 2,634 vehicles and fuel tanks, 105 anti-aircraft batteries, 660 tactical unmanned aerial systems, 65 special equipment platforms such as bridging vehicles, and 4 mobile Iskander ballistic missile systems, and 144 cruise missiles shot down by Ukrainian air defenses. Without a doubt, in the war in Ukraine, the high-mobility artillery rocket systems has been one of the most talked about weapon systems of the last few weeks. Ever since the US military announced its decision to send the M142 high-mobility artillery rocket systems to Ukraine last month, the weapon system has been making the rounds. Crewed by just 3 men, driver, gunner, and section chief, the M142 HIMARS can fire its arsenal of 6 missiles against targets located up to 43 miles away. As a wheeled vehicle, the M142 HIMARS is highly mobile and can launch its missiles and reposition itself within seconds. These are critical capabilities to help the Ukrainians repel the Russian offensive in the east. One such need is the high-mobility artillery rocket system I just mentioned, which responds to Ukraine's top priority ask. This system will provide Ukraine with additional precision in targeting at range. The Ukrainians have given us assurances that they will use this system for defensive purposes only, Dr. Colin Kahl, the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, had said during a press briefing when the weapon system was first announced. For now, the Pentagon has committed an additional 4 M142 HIMARS to Ukraine for a total of 8. In addition, it keeps sending guided multiple launch rocket system munitions to replace those used by the M142 HIMARS against Russian targets. The first 4 high-mobility artillery rocket systems the US military sent to Ukraine were already pre-positioned in Europe in anticipation of the need to give them to the Ukrainian military. In a sense, the HIMARS has freed the Ukrainians from really taking the fight to the Russians. Before the introduction of the weapon system, Russian ammunition depots, command and control centers, and other military targets of interest that were located within occupied Ukrainian territory and close or inside urban centers were pretty much out of the question for the Ukrainians. In sharp contrast to the Russian tactics, the Ukrainian military tries to avoid launching strikes that could result in collateral damage and kill or wound civilians. They are, after all, fighting on their behalf, not against them. But the accuracy of the HIMARS has enabled the Ukrainian military to revisit targets that were once out of the question because of the potential for unwanted collateral casualties.